Yeah, don't forget that, Candace, because we forgot mine.
Yeah,
Remember last
I remember this time.
time?
All right, so hello everybody and welcome to our November MWM Zoom call. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Tonight we have special guest David Toupin, who will be discussing 10 common mistakes that investors make. Specifically, 5 of those mistakes are pertaining to underwriting and the other 5 are just in general things that investors might miss. So I'm sure that most, if not all of you already know David, but if not, I'll say a few things about him so you know who's talking with us tonight. David Toupin is a top millennial real estate investor, speaker, and entrepreneur. David is the co-founder of Obsidian Capital, an Austin, Texas-based real estate investment firm. David started investing at the age of 20 in Michigan, where he bought his first property in college, a 12-unit apartment complex. Prior to graduating with a finance degree at the University of Detroit Mercy, David had acquired $7 million in multifamily real estate holdings. By the age of 24 years old, David has built a real estate empire as a key principal with over $50 million in multifamily real estate holdings and has raised north of $10 million in capital. Obsidian Capital has a current pipeline of $20 million of new development projects and has also recently started a real estate software company, which is centered around David's deal analyzer that he created. Obsidian Capital is currently focused on acquiring existing commercial and multifamily properties, growing their ground-up development branch and software company, and also building their new corporate headquarters in Austin, Texas. So that being said, David, I'll let you go ahead and take the floor. And ladies, we will have Q&A at the end. And David, if you want to allow the ladies to ask questions throughout, that's fine too. It's totally up to you.
100%. Yeah, I love to do these. And thank you so much for the intro.
Yeah,
I love to keep these super casual. And, you know, we could almost have like an open conversation as I'm going along. I think that's the most helpful because, you know, I'll just touch on certain points. And as I'm going, please stop me, raise your hand, say something, just shout it out, and ask, you know, any questions along the way. I think people normally get the most out of these. And I normally have the most fun when it's kind of like an open conversation and discussion. And really that allows me not to just kind of talk, but you guys to get input and feedback and for us to have a conversation and go down different rabbit holes that might help people more and more. So, which is really what I'm here for, is to help you guys out as much as I can. So I can just get started. And like I said, feel free to jump in at any time. I have a list of 10 things. I don't know how long, you know, it's going to take for me to go through these, but we'll definitely do Q&A at the end. And then, you know, like I said, we could just kind of have an open discussion as I go. So I guess I'll get started. I'll dive right in. So I wanted to go through 5 things at first. And I can just talk, or I might at some points share my screen and write some stuff out. It depends on some of these points I might, but really I'll just kind of talk at first, and then we'll see if I need to write or calculate anything out, I'll do that. But the first tip I have for underwriting is that a lot of people use way too high of a rental growth rate. And so in a lot of financial models, people, you know, I'm just going to write this out because I think it'll be easier for people to remember. So maybe I can switch. How do I share? Can I share screen? There we go. Let me know. Can you guys hear me still?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep,
Okay,
I can hear you.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to write these out. You may or may not be able to see me, but that's okay. So number 1, I've got people use too high of a rental growth rate. And this is really, I see this a lot in people's models as they analyze deals. They put in, 3.5%, 4%, especially once you get into, a 5, 7, 10-year analysis. It really, really kicks up the income because it compounds every year. It's 3% growth from year one, and then you take the year two and you increase that by 3%. So it compounds and it increases it so much that when people go to sell, the income and the NOI has grown so high, it almost isn't realistic. So I normally take whatever the standard is in the area. Let's say it is a 3%. I normally go down 0.5%. Just to be safe, especially with where we're at in the market. I know we have seen pretty high rental growth in the past 10 years, but I like to be conservative on a lot of aspects of the underwriting. And this is just another aspect where I like to shoot a little bit below where the market may actually be. So I've actually had times when I've gone to lenders or equity groups and I've had it at like 2% and they're like, dude, you're low, you need to increase this. And I'm like, I mean, for your purposes and for the loan, I don't mind showing a higher one, but I'm not going to show the investors and project higher because I like to be conservative. So that's point number one. I don't know if anyone has any questions. It's pretty self-explanatory and straightforward for that point. Not too complex, but that's the rental growth rate. Number two, I have that a lot of people don't properly estimate closing costs. So I would say wrong closing costs. I'm going to list some things out so that you guys know what to include when you're looking at a property and calculating your closing costs. Because, and the reason I know this is the first deal I bought, I left out like a ton of stuff, ended up coming way under budget. And I really had a little seminar on what to include in the future. So I definitely learned there. So a lot of the biggest things you're going to see are tax prorations. And what that is especially if taxes are paid in advance. For example, if I'm buying a property mid of the year 2020 and the seller paid taxes for the year of 2020 in January, I have to prorate back to him and pay back taxes to him or her for let's say if I bought it in June, I have to pay taxes for June, July, August, September, October, November, December, because they've already paid for them. I have to prorate that and pay it back to them. So that's something I didn't really know at first, and that's a big item that can come up if you have to pay, those taxes up front. It's not in every state, tax prorations. It's like in Texas, taxes are paid in arrears. So you actually get a credit at closing, which is really nice. But in other states like Michigan, for example, I'm pretty sure Ohio as well, Indiana, a lot of those states, it is common that you have to pay tax proration. Another one is insurance. Most lenders will make you pay first 12 months up front. I apologize. I have terrible handwriting, but we're going to work our way through it here. Insurance, you're going to have to pay a lot of times first 12 months up front. The lender will require that. And then on top of that, you're going to be escrowing every month insurance costs, or you're going to be paying monthly starting from month one. So you have to come up with an extra year's worth up front. And I didn't know this. A lot of people don't know that. So going into it, you just want to make sure that you're accounting for that. Whatever you're estimating your annual insurance cost is, budget that into your closing costs. You're going to have to come up with that out of pocket at closing most of the time. I'd say 90% of the time. Okay. What's another one? You're going to have loan fees / financing fees. And this is very common. Any type of loan you get, multifamily, if you get agency debt like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or if you guys get local regional banks, there's typically a 1% fee up front. If you're using a broker, sometimes it's 1% from the bank, 1% from the broker. So I would say anywhere from 1 to 2% of the loan amount. Just ask your loan broker what the fee is. Each quote they give you will probably be a little bit different, but it's typically 1% of the loan amount up front. There are other lender fees like lender legal. When you guys start getting into these bigger loans, the lenders take a ton of time with their attorneys reviewing the mortgage documents. and they actually charge you for their time. So that is not included in the loan. That is not included in the fee. That is a separate charge, and you have to pay for lender legal. That can be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 in what I've seen. So I'm just going to put, 5 to 15K. There are additional lender costs. Oh, was there a question?
Yeah, sorry, quick question. How big of a property would that lender legal fee be?
Yeah, so I think, let me think back. I did one earlier this year. It was a $7.2 million loan. I think it was like $14,000 in lender legal fees. So I think if you're down to 5,000, that might be in the $1 to $3 million loan range. It's probably pretty consistent. Once you hit a certain loan amount, I don't think that really goes much higher because it's not more work the bigger the loan is. It's similar amount of work. I think part of it depends on how much back and forth is there with the lender, how many issues or how difficult of a deal is it. I've had ones where it was a little bit higher because there was a lawsuit between a tenant and the seller on the property that came up during our closing period, and they had to really dive in and make sure that there's no liability carrying over to me, the buyer, and that the liability stayed between the tenant that was suing the current owner. So a lot of time was spent in that, and it racked up the legal bill that I had to pay for, unfortunately, which really sucks. But most properties, you're going to be, you can pretty safely budget $15,000, and if you only spend $5,000, great. If you're doing loans under $1 million, I wouldn't budget more than $2,000 to $3,000. Hopefully that helps. Okay, let's see. What else do we have? We have lender legal. There's going to be third-party costs. Let me erase this here. So we're going to have third-party reports, and I should know this pretty well because I just spent $10,000 in the last week on third-party reports. So I'm under contract on a deal right now. So I would say it's pretty safe to budget. This is kind of size dependent. You normally aren't going to spend more than $15,000, but I would budget anywhere from $7,500 to $15K for these. And what third-party reports are is your in phase 1 environmental. I could write this out if you guys want me to. This is phase 1 environmental. We've got a PCA, which is a property condition assessment. I'll clear that up a little bit. Property condition assessment, and what that is a report that this third-party company is going to go in and do that outlines all of the issues with the property, what they suggest you need to fix right up front when you purchase a property, and then also what they think you should set as your reserves every month aside over time due to the current condition of the property. So they'll give this report and suggest it to the lender, and they'll give this report to the lender, and then the lender is going to set in place, an ongoing capital reserve amount. Now, I'll give you a pro tip. The lender, if you wait, the lender will order all of these third-party reports, the phase 1, the PCA. We're going to have I'll just write the other ones out, zoning report and a survey. You don't want a new survey. But the PCA is huge because the lender will get that report and they will order that report if you wait and let them, once you sign up with a certain lender and you put your deposit down. And they'll receive that directly from the third-party company. What's that? So they'll order it, and the problem that you come into a lot of times is this company doesn't really take into account the renovations you're going to be doing. It doesn't take into account the work you're doing up front, and sometimes they're pretty aggressive on your ongoing reserves. Now, our goal is to get the ongoing reserves amount down as far as we can up front, because the lender's going to say, okay, you need to escrow $350 a unit per year into an escrow account with us, and then when you want to do certain items in the property, deferred maintenance, you can come to us. You have to first spend the money to do it, and then you can come to us to get a draw and get reimbursed from this fund that you're paying into. So because we want to have more cash flow, the lower that number is that they require us to reserve, the better. So pro tip, and a lot of people don't know this, I learned this from good old Glenn Gonzalez, my business partner, and we order all of these reports up front, like day one when we go under contract on a deal, and we make sure that these reports come to us first. I will go back and forth with the company that does the PCA, property condition assessment, and I will look at it, and if there's anything that's off in there, like if they think the roofs really need to be done right away, or if they think the parking lot needs more work than it does, or mechanicals are in worse condition, I'll fight with them on certain points, and I'll be like, and I'll get them down to a point where I'm more comfortable. So I once got a company down from estimating $400 per unit in annual reserves down to $250, which is normally their minimum, but $250 is where I like it to be at, and I'm more comfortable because then we have greater cash flow. So I just explained to them all the work we were going to be doing up front, and then that brought their number down to like 256 or something like that in annual reserves per unit. And then that was what was given and suggested to the lender, who then implemented that reserve amount. So if I didn't, they would have gotten $400 in reserves, and good luck going to the lender at that point and having them reduce that, because they're going to argue with you on it. So much better to do it yourself. You are in control of that. I know I just went off on a tangent, but hopefully that is a good tip that saves you guys some money. Let's see, what else do we have here? Yeah, go for it.
So is the PCA the same as the inspection, or is it either or?
What inspection are you referring to?
Well, normally I bought a 6 unit and they didn't require me a PCA because probably it's a small property, but we did inspections.
Well, so it's kind of a supplement to your own inspections, I guess, if that helps. It's something that they're going to have somebody go through that's really good at estimating renovation costs. And, I like it too, on top of the fact that it's normally required. It's kind of nice to have, because they're going to budget out costs, what they think the costs are for a lot of different things, like replacing roofs, siding, windows, mechanical systems of the parking lot. I mean, and you're going to be able to take that and compare it to the budget that your contractor gives you, to the budget that your property management company gives you, and then help really refine your actual internal budget that you plan on coming up with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but is this required by the bank, the PCA?
Yes, most banks require that. Yeah, especially if you're going agency loans.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So third-party reports, we got insurance, tax prorations, loan fees. I'm trying to think, what am I missing? Let me pull up my list real quick. I might be missing something. I just want to make sure you got it all. So I also have, you've got like appraisals. That's kind of third-party report, but not exactly the same as those 4 third-party reports that you're going to want to order on your own. But yeah, there's going to be an appraisal. I mean, that can be anywhere from, on a smaller property, $2,500 up to, if you're on a, 10 to 50 unit, up to 10, 12 grand if you're doing a 200 unit property. So, just make sure to budget for that. You're going to have your own legal costs. So buyer, legal. We spend, because we have our attorneys do everything, we spend, and it's not cheap. I'd say it's pretty average to be in around the $15,000 range is pretty good, especially if you're syndicating. I'm going to say $15K if syndicating. And that should cover from purchase agreement negotiations all the way to closing document review and everything in between. Title review of environmental issues, all that kind of stuff, syndication documents, setting up your LLC, etc. So that should cover you. We spend $20,000. Our attorneys are a little expensive, but they're really good, and they totally watch our back on everything. So, and they rarely ever charge us over if it goes over. So, let's see, survey environmentals. Oh, title policy. I mean, you're going to have to have a buyer's title policy. That's something you should account for. Let's see, what else do we have here? That's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much all the fees. I mean, some of those things were things I missed when I first started. So just want to make sure you guys have a list of everything there. Number 3. Let's move on to number 3. Get back to my list here. So not raising enough money for CapEx is what I had as my number 3. And I think a lot of people, myself included when I started, really underestimate what needs to be done on a property. So I'm going to write down not having enough CapEx money. And that can really kill a deal. So part of our strategy going into every property that we buy is taking care of pretty much all of the deferred maintenance up front. And we do that because we don't want to have to deal with it out of cash flow along the way. I have seen deals go horribly, horribly wrong because people do not take care of it up front, and then their cash flow is entirely eaten up by maintenance issues. Their staff is overworked and underutilized because they're spending so much time fixing broken AC units that they can't paint and turn units, and they can't focus on doing work orders for tenants because there's so much deferred maintenance, and it's just gonna affect your property in so many ways. So just make sure whatever you're raising for renovations, always raise a little bit more. We bought a property earlier this year, which I think some people in this video chat are actually invested and involved in. And we ended up budgeting for about $100,000 rainy day fund / contingency in our budget. And we ended up over budgeting, and we came in with, I think, about $250,000. It ended up being our rainy day budget. So we were super conservative. We ended up having way more money sitting in the bank than we needed, but it's good to have that because if anything comes up in the future, we're prepared for it. We had, I think, a boiler went bad within the first 2 months, and we were able to easily and without worrying spend the $10,000 to replace it. So, and now that'll work for the next 10 years with no problems. So just little things like that. Always raise more money than you think. If I were to put a number to it, I would say, add, good rule of thumb could be to add 10%. Add 10% onto whatever you've got. Get this thing working again. Add 10% would be a good rule of thumb, I would say. Okay. Number 4, not adjusting taxes. Let me write this one down. This is actually, I would say this is probably the biggest thing. I hope people are talking about it enough now that it's not as big of a problem, but it is a huge problem that a lot of people don't look into. So what happens, and this is not a blanket statement, it is not everywhere. Every state is different. It's normally state by state where this rule changes, but in many states, when you acquire a property and when the deed transfers, it uncaps the assessed value of a property, the taxable value of a property, and the city or county will come in, reassess it, and your taxes will increase the following year. And so it's not always the case. I think, let me name a state, for example. I think it's North Carolina. They reassess every 4 years. So you can buy it and you just need to find that schedule. I think it's actually even numbers. So it happened in 2016, and then I think in 2020 they're going to reassess. So if it gets reassessed and then you buy it in the end of 2020, you're going to have 3 years of probably 2 to 3% growth, and then they'll reassess it in 2024. So every state's different, but most states, I would say, reassess upon sale. Especially, I know a lot of people invest in Texas, possibly in this group. In Texas, they definitely do. And I have seen some insane tax increases upon sale. I had one we bought earlier this year. It went from 130,000 to I think this year it was reassessed and our taxes went up to 210,000 because of the sale. And so the more that properties sell in these cities at higher prices, it's also going to affect the reassessed value of yours because they use nearby sales comps. So you just have to really, I would say my advice is ask local tax assessor when you're analyzing deals how taxes are calculated. And that's the biggest thing. The second biggest thing is there are a lot of times local tax consultants or attorneys. And they will be able to help you out as well. We have in Texas, there's a company called Ryan, and they are tax consultants. That's specifically what they do is they go in and they fight the city assessors on taxes for properties. We litigate every year for every property on getting our taxes down because normally there's a small flat fee and then we pay them a percentage of the decrease in taxes that they earn for us. So they're kind of commission based and it's worth it for us. I mean, if we pay them $2,000 a year and then 20% of the savings, if they get $20,000 in savings, we've just spent $6,000, but we've saved 14 net. So it still makes sense for us. So that's huge. You can ask people that before you go in and buy a property. I wouldn't reveal to the city that you're the specific property. If you're asking local tax assessor, I wouldn't say to the city, I'm buying an ABC property at this address. What would you do, or how's this calculated? I would just say in this city, what happens if I buy a property with the taxes? When do you reassess? How do you reassess it? How do they determine that value? What is the tax rate? And just how is that all calculated? So that's what I would go in and do, and just learn that. Once you know how to do it for the market you're in, you really don't need to put in too much more work. You just need to find the rates and how it's assessed. For example, in Michigan, when you buy a property, let's say you buy a property for $10 million, how they calculate it is they take that, the max that the taxes can go to is based on this equation. They take the purchase price, they oops, what just happened there? They take the purchase price, they multiply by 50%. So that's 5 million. And then they divide that by 1,000. And then they multiply it by a millage rate. So essentially they're multiplying it by a tax rate. And that might be like 60, for example. So basically they're taking 5 million times 0.06 or 6%. And that comes out to, whatever it comes out to. That's how they calculate the taxes. So just figure that out in Texas. I'll give you another example. In Texas, that might be times 0.8% or 80%, right? Times 0.8 or 80% to find the assessed value. So the assessed value is now 8 million, and then you multiply that by a rate, which is in a lot of these areas, it's like 2.7%. So that's how you figure out what that rate's going to be. So everywhere is different. You just really want to figure that out for the market you're in. Make sure you know what that's going to be. You don't want to go in and underwrite a property and make an offer just assuming taxes are going to go up by 3% every year when they might double in year one and then go up 3% every year. Huge factor. So I'll go on to number 5. This is one of the biggest things I see. And it kind of goes along with the higher rental growth rate that I mentioned in number 1, but not looking at the exit price in your model and only using just a cap rate that seems like it's reasonable. So what I mean by that is the market may be at a 6% cap rate, and you might put in 6.25, 6.5 to be conservative, and you're looking at this over a 10-year period. Maybe you're buying it at $50,000 a unit, and you're planning to sell it in 10 years, and maybe the comps are at 80,000 a door right now, so the comps are pretty high. But if you look at your analyzer, a 6.5 cap sounds reasonable, but over 10 years, it produces an exit sales price of like 115,000 a unit. I see people do this a lot, and they just put in a cap rate that seems reasonable, but they don't understand that because of the 3.5% rent growth they've got, it's compounded so much over 10 years that it's produced this 110,000 a door sale price. And that may make sense on paper, but is it really reasonable, and is it really financially feasible, and does it make sense for you to estimate and project that you're going to sell a property for that much? Is that smart to do when you're projecting these numbers out to banks and investors? In my opinion, no. It's fully possible for that to happen. We've seen larger jumps like that over the past 10 years. But being where we're at in the market, I really like to pay attention to where I'm showing my exit cap rate and making sure that it's closely supported by sales comps today. I know that it's going to go up in the future. Real estate appreciates, and I've got rent growth over time. But is it reasonable for me to show, just use an exit cap rate like that, and it shows a sale price that's extremely high, but it's way higher than the comps we've got today? I just don't think that I would be using my fiduciary responsibilities to my investors in a proper way by doing that. And so it might show great returns, but is it a reasonable assumption? I don't believe so. So I like to make sure not only am I choosing a cap rate that makes sense, but I'm also going to look at that sales price in the financial model and make sure that it does make sense in fact, and it's at least closely supported by comps. It's okay to be over the comps if you're looking 5-10 years out, but just don't over exaggerate it and don't overdo it. So I would just say pay attention to projected sales price and not just cap rate. So I would do that. That's what I would say. So I'm going to hop back here really quick. Let me see. Can I go back? Am I still casting? Okay. So hopefully I didn't bore you guys too much with all of that. I wanted to hop back in and see if anyone has any questions before I hit the next 5 points.
Yeah, I have a question, David.
Cool.
Also, the number one is a too high rental growth rate. That's one of the biggest mistakes, right? And
Yep.
what would be the most conservative growth rate that you think is reasonable enough for you to present to your investors?
I normally go with 2 to 2.5%, depending on the market. If I'm in a really soft market, I might do like 1.5%. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty typically, I start every deal off at 2%. And if I think it's a really good area and I believe in it, I think it's going to grow over time, I might show 2.5%. I rarely do 3% unless I'm only looking at like a 3-year sale, 4-year sale. If I'm doing anything longer than 5 years, I don't like to go 3% or higher normally, just because it just compounds so much. And you'll see if you do a 10-year sale on 3%, your exit price at what looks like a reasonable cap rate is going to be insane. So I normally stick to that 2.5%. Awesome,
because that it's almost like a normal rate to use 3%. It's very common. So,
it seems like it is pretty common, but I think 3% is not bad if you really dial down your exit cap rate. If you're going to use the same cap rate and use 3% over like a 5 or 7 year, you're gonna see an exit price which just doesn't look reasonable to me, especially with where we're at in the market.
Exactly. I agree with you.
I mean, people are, and maybe you guys can see this whiteboard. People are right now, we're in a place where the market was up here in 2007, right? And then it crashed, it went down, and now we're back to a point where it's a little bit higher. in 2019. And, you know, there's a chance it could keep going up at what rate, I don't know. What if it goes back down and then comes back up? You know, it's not going to be at a point that's significantly higher than where it's at now. And I'm playing a game of odds. I don't know this, but I think about what are the odds that something like this happens.
Mm-hmm.
The odds tell us that it's something's going to happen, right? And so where are we going to be at if you use that 3% growth rate and over the course of 5, 7, 10 years and the cap rate that we have today, you're going to show a sales price that's like way up here. And so I see people doing that all the time, and it doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it's prudent. So that's my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I like that. I like that because, you know, 3%, especially the longer that the hold is, you know, like, for example, it's up to 10 years. I don't think it's sustainable, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, if you throw it into my analyzer or whatever analyzer you're using, just go into your model and look at the last deal you were analyzing and change that growth rate from 3% to 2% and tell me what happens. You're probably going to be like, whoa, this deal doesn't make sense anymore.
Yes.
And all that changed was 1 little percent on the growth rate. Yep.
That's why it's very.
And so when I noticed that, how fragile that was, and think about that, you're saying, and people are saying 3% over the course of 10 years. What happens if it literally just goes down to 2%? Okay, the deal doesn't make sense. What happens if the market crashes and it doesn't even go down? Rents just stay constant. Like, go put 0% into an analyzer really quick over 10 years and see what happens. It's going to completely kill the deal for you. And so, you know, I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy. I don't want to project that there's no rental growth, but I also want to be realistic. And if a deal is that fragile over 1%, is it really a good deal?
I have a follow-up question to that, David. What about your expense growth? How do you determine what expense growth escalator you'll put in your analyzer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I use 1% across the board for things like payroll, utilities, and insurance. Taxes, I normally use 3%. And then everything else I have at 0%. And it depends on how long. If I'm doing a 10-year hold, I normally then add in 1% on everything else. And if I'm doing a 3-year hold, sometimes I'll only do a 3% on 3% on taxes, and I'll do maybe a 1% on insurance and payroll. But if you're only holding for 3 years, the odds are you're not going to have significant growth. So you don't have to get too aggressive on your increases.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
Another question, David, if no one else is going to ask a question.
Go ahead, yeah.
Number 5 of the mistakes that you've given, not looking at the exit price. How can you reasonably estimate the exit cap rate as far as, you know, and what's your basis in estimating the exit cap rate?
Yeah, so I make sure everything else in the analyzer is really filled out and accurate. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll look at that exit sale price. And if I'm at a cap rate, which seems reasonable, but I look at the sales price, and let's say I'm in Dallas and I'm buying a property for $70,000 a door. I'm putting 10 a door into it, so I'm all in at 80, and I'm projecting it to sell for, you know, 90, 95 a door. Would be a reasonable assumption based on other comps. You know, if I were to sell in 3 to 5 years, 95 doors seems reasonable. But I'm at a 6.5 cap, and my analyzer is showing that it's 115 a door, which I've had happen before. To me, based on what I look at, I'll look at other sales in the area. If everything's selling around 90 a door, 115 a door doesn't seem to make a ton of sense to me. Even though the cap rate, 6.5%, seems like it's pretty reasonable. So to me, I normally will just tone down the cap rate. I'll bump it up to 7, 7.5 till I'm at a little bit more reasonable exit price, because First of all, I think it would be hard to get investors to believe in that, and I think it'd be hard for a lender to believe that. And I myself would have a hard time believing that that's possible, although it might be. I just tend to be conservative.
So you just go and for you to correct that, you just go back and raise the cap rate.
I'll just raise the cap rate till I'm at a sales price that seems like it makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So I could dive back in here. A couple of these I don't really need to write down. But the next point, these are less on underwriting and more just in general, like mistakes I've made and things that I think are really important. So the first thing is not raising money the right way. When I first started, my first big equity raise was $1.7 million. And I literally did everything wrong. I could not have done it worse. And a lot combined with the fact that I barely had any investors lined up in the first place, I just did a terrible job. So a couple of the things I did wrong were I started with the wrong structure. I started way too aggressive in my favor and thought I'd be able to sell investors on it. I couldn't. So especially if it's on one of your first few deals, don't get too greedy. Start off with a structure that's reasonable, and maybe like an 8% preferred return and a 75-25 split. That's a pretty standard. Or like what we do, we just do an 80-20 or 85-15 split, no preferred return. I can't remember what I first did, but I just know it was way too aggressive and it wasn't realistic. So start with something realistic. The next thing I did was, and I know none of you guys would ever do this because you're always smarter than I am. I put all the documents into a Dropbox, and like I had pictures, I had my analyzer, I had a little summary in a Word doc, and I just sent it out to investors and say, hey, let me know if you're interested and you want to invest. Investors do not want to take the time to go through a Dropbox link and go through all these documents and look at a spreadsheet to see what the numbers look like. That's not their business. They don't know what the heck's going on in a spreadsheet. So they don't want to spend the time to do that. So what I figured out and what is very common in the industry is you put together an OM or an offering memorandum, which is a PDF that just summarizes everything that's going on in the deal. And I might be able to show you guys an example. Let me see if I can pull one up really quick. I'm sure you guys have all seen OMs before, but I'll just show you what we just put one together for a deal we have right now that we're working on. So let me see if I can find it and show you. Okay. Let's see if that downloads. Cool. Okay, let me share it with you. Screen share. There we go. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let me know if you can see this. Can you guys see?
Yeah.
So we now have, an OM that we put together, a template, which really it's in PowerPoint. It's kind of drag and drop. So when we have a new deal, we just switch out the photo, the name. We'll link it to our website with that link right there. We got a disclaimer, executive summary with highlights on the returns and everything there. Property information, our project overview, step 1, 2, 3, and 4, what we plan to do, the location, all this stuff. We have a pro forma, operating expenses, our unit mix and projected rents. So basically, it's just a nice document they can go through and just scroll through and look at things. And I'm gonna be honest, most investors will look at this and they'll be like, all right, whatever, this makes sense. They don't really know a lot of people, unless they're sophisticated and they understand the industry, don't really know what's going on. They'll just look at the returns, and if the returns look good, then they make a decision off that. That's just my personal opinion on most of the investors I know. A lot of the investors I know that I have that aren't in the industry, they kind of just look through this and, it all looks good to them. And so they say they just come in on the deal. They don't really know what's going on. These are ones that aren't involved in the industry. So like doctors and dentists and attorneys, some information on us and then our track record and whatnot. So pretty simple, nothing too crazy. But it's good to have something pretty like that they could look at and make a decision. It shows that you're professional. So having an OM is good. The other thing is you don't ever want to come across like you need someone's money. I don't know. I mean, a lot of you guys have been in a position where you have or considered investing in projects or in syndications. I'm sure the more someone bugs you about it and the more someone asks you about it and wants you to come in and begs you to come in a deal, the less you want to invest. It's almost like when you have a guy that wants to take you on a date and he texts you 100 times and he's bugging you and pestering you. That's not the guy you want to go on a date with, right? So it's the same concept. It's the same concept. So don't ever be in a position where you're begging someone for money or where you come across like you need it. Your job is simply to present this to the investors and let them make their decision whether they want to invest in the deal or not. So I normally keep it pretty simple. That's kind of all I have for raising money. Does anyone have any questions on that, like tactics or strategies around raising money? Oh, I like texting. I mean, calling and texting people individually. Like when I have a deal come up, I just showed you that deal. I haven't started raising money for it yet, but when we do, I'm gonna reach out personally to all of my current investors, and I'm gonna call them and I'm gonna tell them about the deal because I want to add that personal touch. I want them to know that I do really care about them continuing not only to invest in previous deals, but I want you to come in on my current deals and future deals. And so I'm going to personally reach out to a lot of people and a lot of my investors just one-on-one. So not just sending an email blast. I will literally go through one by one and call people and text people. So
yeah, that's how you got me. Just kidding.
I'll be calling. Hey, chat. I'll be calling you, chat. I'm coming. Just give me another
flowers and everything.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, just add a personal touch. It's all about building a relationship with investors.
For sure.
Exactly. You know. So yeah. Yep. Any other questions on raising money?
Yeah, if your investors will call you and ask you, do you have, let's say, your investors will ask you, do you have any deal that has 10% cash on cash? Like that.
If they did, I would. I mean, yeah, I just tell them what deals I have going on currently, and really, I would probably try to set expectations on where the market's at. I mean, I have an investor right now that wants to invest. He wanted to invest $10 million 1031 with me and Glenn, and he actually is about to invest with us. But his expectations up front were really high because of deals he had put it in the past years ago that have produced really high returns. And he told me, he's like, man, I want a 10 pref, I want all this. I was like, look, man, like that's great, but that's not something I can give you, and I don't think that's something you're going to find in today's market. And so he went out and he looked at other deals, and he started figuring out that wasn't going to happen. And I just come back around. He's like, dude, this market sucks, man. There's nothing for me to put my money into. And so he's going to put it into some deals with us because he's learned the expectation. So I just be honest and just let him know like where the market's at. And, not many people are getting 12 cash on deals right now. If you are, I'm very happy for you because that's awesome. And let me know because I'll invest. So, yeah. I guess I'll move on to the next one. I know we don't have a ton of time. This goes along with not having a big enough CapEx budget, is not having a rainy day fund. It's always good to have a rainy day fund. Always raise. If you're raising $2 million, raise another $100,000. Sometimes I don't even include that in the return calculations. If I have like a 1.9 raise, I'll raise $2 million. I'll have in my operating agreement that we're raising $2 million, and that extra $100,000 can come in handy if something ever goes wrong. Always raise more money. If you were to put a percentage on it, maybe add 5% on whatever you're raising and raise that extra money. Point number 3 of just not underwriting but general tips is people start too big a lot of times. I'm a 10x thinker. I love thinking huge. I love, the Grant Cardone philosophy, but I think there's a point where you can go too big. And I've had a lot of people that are just starting off and they're trying to get into business, and they approach me with a 200-unit deal, and it's way beyond what they can do at the time. The first deal I ever tried to buy was 44 units. I went under contract and I pulled out because it was a little too big. So I went down to 12 unit. And because I did a 12 unit and another 12 unit, I was able to then get into a 100-unit deal because I knew more of what I was doing. I was more confident, and I was able to raise the money and bring more things to the table. Not only will it give you confidence, but it will give you leverage. After I did those 12 units, I still couldn't go and buy a 100-unit deal on my own. I still had to bring in a co-GP for someone just to sign the loan, right? A loan sponsor, key principal. And because I had some experience, I was able to sit down with them and say, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to line up the manager. I'm going to self-manage the property. I'm going to bring this, and this to the table. I'm going to manage the whole transaction. I only need you to sign on the loan. And so I only had to give them 5 out of the 30% GP split that I have. I got to keep 25 because I had leverage and experience. If I did not have leverage and experience in doing a couple other deals beforehand, they probably would have gotten 25, taken over the deal, and given me 5, and I would have gotten screwed. And I would have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I just sold this deal a couple months ago. It was huge for me that I started small and went into that deal having the leverage to get a bigger piece of equity. I know this is a team sport. I'm totally on board with that. I think it's great. I think you should pair up with good people. I also think it's a huge problem nowadays where people are going in and buying deals with a team of 8 people. And you split up 20% of GP equity between 8 people. And I mean, you're not in this business to make friends. I know it's great. I love making friends in the business. That's not the only reason you're here. You're here to create wealth and passive income for you and your families. And how are you going to do that if you're splitting it up, the pie up between so many people? So my advice is do yourself a favor. Start a little smaller. Maybe not 12, but maybe do 30, 40 units, 50 units. Start a little smaller, get the experience. You now come to Dave Toupin and Glenn Gonzalez with leverage and saying, hey, I found this deal. I'm going to bring X, Y, and Z to the table. I would like you to bring A, B, and C. Well, let's split it 50-50. And I'm going to be much more inclined to say, okay, well, let's do something like that because I know you've got the experience to do it. If you're a beginner and you don't have any of that you're bringing to the table, I'm going to say, all right, step aside. I'll give you a piece, but I'm running this thing. And I'm going to take the majority of it. That's how I would want to do it. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth. I always like to tell people that I think it's great if you want to go in and do a 200-unit deal on your first one and get a small piece and get the experience. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to really get bigger and bigger pieces, you're going to be better off starting smaller, doing a majority of the work, learning hands-on, and then going into bigger deals. So
thank you for saying that, David. That's very, that's not said very often. So thank you. It's refreshing to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Nobody says that. Everyone says go and do a 200-unit deal on your first deal. I don't think that's smart. I think it's wrong because you're going to sit sidelines to a bigger group that is going to really do all the work, and they're going to tell you they're going to teach you everything along the way, and they're going to teach you some stuff, but they're still going to do a majority of the work, and you're not going to learn or get hands-on. And then you get a little piece in it, and you get to say you own 200 doors, but how much is 0.5% really worth? I don't want to bash it. I mean, it's still good, but I would say do yourself a favor, start smaller, do all the work, and learn and get hands-on, and then go into a bigger deal with more leverage. So
yeah, it's really refreshing to hear that, David, because like Renee said, it's just not common. Even the path I've taken with trying to take down some smaller deals and learn, I've had several people say, well, why aren't you targeting 100+ unit deals? It's just because I want to gain the experience, and just raising capital for someone else's deal is not the way to do that for me. So, but anyway, that's nice to hear, David.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's BS. I think it's
real. Keep it real.
What's that?
It's nice to keep it real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep real, no fluff. Well, I mean, a lot of people, hear about the projects I've worked on, and they think I've just got a little piece in all these deals. I've never co-GP'd with anybody. I've only ever brought in like a loan sponsor. So everything I've done has been hands-on from day one. I've written operating agreements and PPMs, and I run the loan from start to finish. I've raised capital. Like I do every part of the transaction, and I've only gotten good at that because I started small. So I want all you guys to know how to do all that and not just sit sidelines on a team that's doing all the work. And the only way for you to do that is a lot of times to start smaller. So that's the way you're actually going to be an expert in this. So I'll touch really quickly. That's probably one of my most important points, but the last two ones, I actually put this, the one after this kind of goes along with number 3. Number 4 here would be having too many people involved on the GP side of the deal. I won't get involved on a deal. Glenn and I have a rule: if there's more than one other GP, if someone brings us a deal and wants to partner on a deal and do it, I'll do it with one other group. However, I won't do it if there's more than one group involved. I also will never bring in on our deal more than one group. So we'll bring in one partner to help raise money, but I will not bring in 2. So if it's a deal where I cannot raise the full amount of equity, I need to bring in a partner that can bring the rest themselves without having to go to multiple other groups, because it's not worth our time to split it up more than 2 ways. So that's another thing. And then my last point, this is huge, not touring properties. You may have a drastically different offer by touring a property and not touring a property. And I put in a lot of offers without touring a property, but if I know I'm close to winning a bid, or if I put in an offer on the first round before maybe best and final, and I get really close and I get to best and final, I will always tour a deal. You don't ever want to get down the finish line and waste anyone's time and not tour a deal and get really close and actually win the bid on a property without touring a deal, because then you might see it and it might adjust your thoughts, your renovation budget, your underwriting, and really you might at that point back out because there's certain things you didn't know about it, or you just, once you guys start to tour a lot of deals, you just get a feeling once you walk through properties. You'll feel the same way a tenant feels when they walk through. And if you don't feel good and you feel like it's a really crappy area and you just don't feel good about walking through, that's the same thing that a potential tenant is going to feel. And that's probably why they're not paying a lot in rent. And that's not something you can get from the pretty pictures on a broker OM. It's just not something you're going to get. So in addition to that, touring the asset will set you significantly farther ahead when you're in the bidding process. When that broker goes to the owner and they say, okay, I've got these 5 offers, they're all pretty competitive, but these 2 people actually came out and toured the deal with me. Those are the 2 people the seller's going to want to go with. I will almost never sell to someone that has not toured a deal or toured the deal that I'm selling. So touring it will also put you ahead in the running to buy a property. So that's my 10 points. That's everything.
Hi, David.
That's all I know. You guys have it all now.
David, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
What tools do you use for underwriting?
So I have an analyzer. There's a free one on my website if you want to check it out. And it should help you be able to analyze deals. And then I also have a little bit more complex version that you can buy. And I'll put that in the there's a lot of great ones out there. Mine's not the only one. I will tell you that mine's the best because I made it. But so I'm sure so will everybody else that made their own.
I use David Toupin's analyzer. I'm sorry, who's this? Is this? Yeah, but just to let you know, I use David Toupin's analyzer, and it's the most, it's a lifesaver for me.
Thanks, chat.
Okay, I could definitely go on his website and look for it. Thank you.
When I was before I met David, I had Michael Blanks because everybody's just talking about Michael Blanks. But I think the more user-friendly analyzer is David Toupin, for sure.
And guys, right now, I just spent $50,000 of my own money. I didn't raise it. I spent $50,000 with a software development company, and I'm turning that into an online web-based analyzer. It's going to be way easier to use. It's once I get into it and test it a bunch, it's going to take out a lot of the errors. So when you put certain things in that maybe in Excel you don't know if it makes sense or not, I'm going to have little notifications that come up and say, hey, that's not really typical for your expenses to be below 35%. You should take a look at this. It'll do things like that and will really help you analyze the deal. So my goal is, and it's going to be free to use pretty much. And you're going to have, a certain amount of uses a month. And then if you want, it's going to be like a monthly payment. If you want to continue to use it, it'll be pretty cheap. But so I'm turning it into an online web-based software. There isn't another one out there that I know of. So hopefully that'll be helpful.
When is that projected to be ready, David?
So we'll have the first version out in January, and then it'll be out in January, and then I'll just hopefully continue to improve over time. But I would say January. Once I start testing it, I'm going to start marketing it a lot more and talking about it a lot more online. But you guys are probably some of the first people I've really told. So.
Is that the link you shared in the chat right now?
No, so the link I shared in the chat is just my website for the Excel version. And anyone who has the Excel version, I'm going to give some sort of like free usage of the online version when it comes out, anyone who's bought it. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Yes.
I know some of the ladies in our MWM group were discussing this the other day, and we had talked about we were going to ask you on the Zoom call. I don't know if anybody's here that was in that discussion, but they wanted to know what's your screening process when you receive deals? Like, how do you determine if you want to dive deeper into a full underwriting quickly?
Okay. Yeah, I could even show you. Let's do one live. I know I got a deal sent to me earlier, and I haven't looked at it yet. Let me see if I can share my screen. Pull it up. Bard Hoover. Just listed. Foxborough in Irving. 360 units. How do we get this to go away? Okay. There's another one. Due next week. 256 units. This is the one. So I'll first look at a deal. Say I get this email. Can you guys all see this, by the way? Okay, cool. So I'll get an email like this. Bart Hoover, he's a good friend of mine, broker in Dallas-Fort Worth. And this is 256 units. It's in Irving. So right off the bat, 256 units, check that box because I like 256 unit properties. Anything over really 100, 125 units I like. So check that box. It's in Irving. Irving is a city in between Dallas-Fort Worth. I like that city, so I'll check that box. As you can see, built in 1980, that meets my criteria. I don't buy anything in the 60s or older. I really don't like early 70s, but I will buy in the 70s, preferably 1980 and newer. So I'll check that box. I like that. I will look at some more factors down here. Average unit size, 853 square feet. That's great. I don't like properties that have a ton of one bedrooms and studios. So, I just looked at a property earlier today where it was 477 units. The average square footage was 517. Super small units, 25% studios, 50% one bedrooms, which are all super small, and the rest were two bedrooms, which were also pretty small. So I don't like that. But on this, 853 square feet, that's a great size. I will look at this, rent per square foot, $1.20. I know for those size units, that's probably pretty close to market, just because I know, Irving and, Dallas-Fort Worth market. $1.20 is pretty good, so there might not be a ton of room to bump rents. And then I'll just email him real quick and say, hey, I like to look at this deal. What's the whisper price? I'll email him right now so you can see it. This is what I do. talk to brokers. And I'll say, Bart Hoover. Hey, my friend, how you doing? How are you doing? What's the whisper price on this one? And that's it. Boom, sent. So I'll ask Bart, he's broker, what's the whisper price on this deal? And if he sends it back to me and he's like 95,000 a unit, just knowing what I know with these sizes in the year, I'll be like, dude, that's way too pricey. If he says 80,000 a door, I'll be like, okay, that's probably worth me diving in and putting in an offer. And then obviously on top of that, you can view offering memorandum. I don't know if it'll pull up or not. You got to go through all this crap. Let's see if it works. Oh, geez, this is annoying. Error. Sorry, hopefully this is helpful. Okay, that's not even working. We'll just skip that. But anyways, I'll dive into the OM and then kind of just go from there. I'll look at some of the details, and if it seems to make sense, it seems like the rents are possibly below market. I'll send it to Jason, our acquisitions guy. He'll underwrite it, send it back to me. I'll review it, and then we'll make an offer.
David, hi.
That's my long-winded response.
I have a question on underwriting.
Mm-hmm.
When I check out a city, I'm looking at, your income, your population growth, cost of housing, et cetera. Everything looks great. And then I drill down to a specific neighborhood, and I've been using city data. And then I find the neighborhood where the apartment is, it's like, there's like 20 grand is like the income. It's like 18% poverty level, but right across the street, it's awesome. So I'm just not, I know city data can be up to 2 years old. Just thoughts, comments about when you see the neighborhood.
So where do you live, Renee? What city are you in?
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Minnesota. So you probably know your city pretty well if you've been there for a while. If I pulled out a map, you'd probably be able to tell me, hey, this is a good area, this is a bad area. I would invest here, I wouldn't invest here. And I'm sure most people would have lived where they lived for a while. And this is what I tend to do more than looking at data at all, is I'll get on the phone with a local management company, a local broker, or a friend that lives in that city, and I'll point it out and I'll say, hey, what do you think of this area? And they'll be like, oh, dude, that neighborhood's rough. You do not want to go there. Or they'll be like, oh, that's a great area. It's right by this mall. It's right by this sports complex. It's right by blah, blah, blah. And that's just something you really don't hear through looking online. And so I love, if I'm in a city I have not looked at before, I love talking to somebody who lives there and has been there for a long time and could just rattle that off really quick. Because I'm a visual person. I'll look at a map and they'll point it all out, and they'll be like, oh, this is a good spot, north of this highway and east of this highway is like a great little pocket you want to be in. And so just that verbal confirmation is the
That's
biggest
very
for me.
helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Holly, I know you've got a question. You've always got questions.
What, David?
I said, Holly, I know you've got a question. I'm just bugging Holly. Holly's on a call with me every Monday. She's on our acquisitions team. She's a rock star. Sorry, I interrupted you, Candace.
No, it's okay. I was waiting to see if Holly had a question.
No, she didn't. I'm just giving her a hard time.
Okay, now I was going to ask you, David, about what are your thoughts on markets that have flat population growth, or maybe just a little bit? If the numbers work and you're buying at a discount, do you see any problem with that?
No, I mean, it depends who your investors are and like what they're cool with and what you're personally okay with. I like to invest in markets where there's population growth and job growth. But there's nothing wrong. I mean, let's be honest, if you look at a city like Detroit, I grew up outside of Detroit, which there's some very nice areas and great spots, and I've made a ton of money on apartments there. I'm buying 100 units there right now, and I would do it again. And if you look at Detroit's population, it's like down. It's a total decline. So it really depends on what you know about the market. You can certainly make money in a market where there's flat or no growth. You just have to really know where you're specifically getting into, I think. There's some parts of Metro Detroit I wouldn't invest in, but there's some parts I really would overpay for. So I think it kind of comes down to just having that, like, same thing that I was just talking about with Renee, is just knowing where you're putting your money into that specific spot. Paige, do you have any questions?
I do, actually. I've been kind of going back and forth between getting something smaller and a 30 unit, or doing something a little, not 200, but maybe something more like 80 to 100. So I've just been kind of figuring that out, because I don't want to over commit and then get too tied up with work too, and then underperform at the property. So that's kind of my question, is what would you put in?
Would you buy the 30 unit on your own, and would you buy the 100 unit on your own, or would you raise money for each, or would it be different?
For the 20 to 30 unit, I have a partner that wants to work with me on that. And then for the 80 unit, yeah, I would have partners, and I would have someone be around.
I don't think it could hurt your cause if so let's say you're going to JV with somebody or have one or two partners on a 30 unit. I mean, I think it'd be a really helpful experience if you haven't done one that size to do that before you get into a bigger one. I will say, no matter what you do, if you're going to be looking at something that's like 30 units, do not buy anything with a loan size under $1 million, because you'll be out of the agency loan range. If you do $1 million in loan size or over, you're going to at least get that Freddie Mac small balance loan, which is their sweet terms. So definitely whatever. And that's my advice for everybody else. Go small, but go big enough to get $1 million loan. So because you're going to get much better loan terms. You don't have to deal with the crappy regional bank terms. That's my advice. I mean, you've got a lot of experience already. You already own property on your own. I still think it's beneficial to do that 30 unit before you go bigger, for sure.
I have a follow-up on that one. I am kind of in the same boat. I'm looking to buy something smaller, but that is closer to me, so I can manage it myself because I have experience already. Or a larger property, and it could be anywhere, because then I would have, if it's a larger property, it could be property management on site, or you just manage the asset, not necessarily the property. But my question is, what's more or less the split when you bring partners or when you do education? For example, you mentioned 5% for somebody that is signing on.
Well, what did you say? At what point do you start finding those partners?
No, more the split of the GP when you use other people to sign the loan, or for the net worth, for example, or if somebody is going to be, if you are not local, then somebody else is going to be local.
Sure. Yeah. So the question was, when do you start talking to those people?
The percentage of the GP split is more the question.
Oh, what percentage? How do you split it up? I know some people have used spreadsheets and calculators to say, like, if you do this, then it's equal to this. I personally, it always comes down to just getting on the phone with whoever the partner is and just talking down and saying, hey, I'm bringing this to the table. I think what I'm doing is worth this. And, you're bringing this to the table. That's probably worth this amount. For somebody that's just signing on the loan, if I were to give a percentage to it, you could probably say anywhere from 15 to let's just say 20% of the total GP amount. That's what signing on the loan could be worth. If I were to just put an amount to it. So if you got 20% of GP to split, that would be 4% reserved for whoever's signing on the loan. In terms of, who's bringing the rest of it to the table, I mean, the rest of it can kind of be split up between who's raising money and who's doing most of the work, the transactional stuff, who is setting up the title company and the lender and doing the inspections and renovations. I have a guy who is up in Michigan. He's doing renovations on our property. It's going to be about a $15,000 per unit renovation. It's a really heavy lift, tons of work we're doing. And so I'm giving him 3% ownership of our 20%, just to do the work at cost, or a lot cheaper than he would charge another client, because I want him to be vested in the deal, and I want him to really perform and have somebody that I trust to do it. So I'm going to give him ownership just for overseeing the renovation, and that's like 3%. A guy brought the deal, and he's going to be boots on ground now that I live in Texas, and so I'm giving him 2% of the deal, ownership in the deal. And so the other 15% we're keeping, but we're the only manager. So on the paperwork, Obsidian Capital, our company, is the only manager. So we make all decisions. The other two guys, they just have like ghost equity, really. They don't have any decision making, even though they're GP. They're not GPs. They're not signing on the loan. They're not doing anything else. So yeah, that's kind of a breakdown. I mean, if I were to need somebody to sign on the loan, yeah, I could probably, like I gave you that example, I gave 5% of 30% one time to a guy that signed on the loan.
What about the deal finder?
Deal finder, so on this one deal right now, I'm giving him 2%. He found the deal, but he's also doing a lot of work. Like right now, I'm having to meet with inspectors. There's elevators in this property, so I had him go find a couple elevator inspection companies. He's meeting with the structural engineer. He's doing a ton of stuff, boots on ground. I'm only giving him 2%, but it's his first deal, and he's really not bringing much else to the table. So, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So in other words, your split would definitely just be discretionary and according to what you think is acceptable and fair to all partners, all people that bring to the table.
Exactly. Yeah, it just comes down to discussion. We just talked about it, and what do you think's fair? How do you feel about it? And just make sure everyone feels good about it going in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Well, if there's no more questions, I guess
you definitely. I guess a real quick point on that though is you are definitely not allowed to base equity and GP split percentages based on how much money people are raising. That's illegal. I know people didn't know this for the longest time, and it was crazy. Nobody's talking about it. And then like 2 months ago, everyone started talking about it, how you can't just raise money on deals for money or for a piece of the deal. And so, just keep that in mind. You can't base somebody's equity percentage strictly on how much money they're raising or bringing to the deal. You can't be compensated directly for that.
That's for sure. They have to be a part of something. They have to do something. They have to have some role in.
Yeah. Your role has to be substantially more than just raising money. Raising money has to almost be a side factor, and everything else you're doing has to be the primary reason why you're being brought in on the deal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when you talk about boots on the ground, what type of responsibilities do they have to get that 2% of the deal?
Yeah, so like I said, he's kind of meeting with contractors, meeting with inspectors right now. If I need him to go meet with the management company while they do their lease audit, he's the guy that's going to go do that. Once we buy it, he will probably do weekly inspections, take pictures of stuff, make sure renovations are going on schedule. I'll still fly out there or our asset manager will fly out there every week at first at least. But he'll be anything that I need done on site or meeting with the city or something like that. As long as it's not super important to the point where I feel like I need to be there to actually be in control of the situation, I'll send him in to do it.
Okay, is there like a time commitment or like an idea of how it's just like whatever is needed?
Yeah, it's whatever I need. Right now, he's just doing whatever I need him to do to earn his way. Yeah. It's not really set in stone. It's a lot of this is super up in the air and flexible, and it's all just, you know, a discussion and negotiation. He doesn't have a full-time job. If he had a full-time job and I knew he couldn't do all this stuff, I'd probably give him less than the deal and just understand that, you know, he's not going to be able to do all this stuff and I'll have to do it.
Right. Thank you. I've been approached to do boots on the ground, so I'm like, you know, wanting to know everything.
Sure. No, that's great.
I know what I'm getting myself into and, you know, what to expect.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people, I mean, throw it out and they've never been through that scenario. And so, you know, it's definitely good to know. Boots on ground really just means someone that can do on-site work and that can be there physically, where the other parties, maybe the lead partners, can't be there on-site physically. So, you know, like I said, meeting contractors, meeting with the management company, meeting with the on-site team, just doing various things in person that they otherwise could not do.
So it's like your rep on site when you can be there.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah, and you're going to be a lot. Yeah, and you're going to be a lot busier during the due diligence closing period, and then, you know, probably the first couple months once you purchase it, and then it'll probably slow down to much less frequent site visits. So I mean, just anticipate a lot of work up front, and then over time it'll definitely slow down.
So did you give him 2% of the GP or 2% of the deal?
2% of the deal, so 2 of our 20%.
Gotcha.
So I guess 10% of the GP. Good question.
I thought it was 2% of the GP, and I was thinking, oh, that's a little
Yeah, that's not a lot. No, yeah, that'd be a little. I'm not that greedy. No.
I was wondering. Okay. Had to clarify.
Yeah, he got 2 of our 20%. Yep. Awesome. Any other questions, guys? This has been fun.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this, David. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, are you guys gonna be in LA?
Absolutely, absolutely, LA. Yeah, I'm actually.
Well, that's your hometown, chat. That's your hometown.
Yeah, let's party. I'm actually not posting here. I have a discount code for everybody here, so I'm gonna post it later.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, for the
Great.
event. Yeah.
Sweet.
All right.
Look, Aaron Hudson said, I was thinking you were a greedy son of a gun.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but
No. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of work for 2% of the GP.
Hey, you got to earn your way.
Yeah.
I'm my first 2 deals. I can't remember how many hundreds of hours I put into them, and I've made next to nothing. But it allowed me. I mean, they're 12-unit deals, so our acquisition fee was like $16,000, which I had to split with the dude that signed on the loan. So, and I had no job, no salary at the time. My management fee was like $300 a month. I mean, I could barely live off of it, but I learned from doing that. I learned so much. I mean, a unit went down, and I couldn't afford to do it because I couldn't hit my 8% preferred return. I went in and I painted that unit, and I would change the appliances out myself. And I mean, I did the work. I switched out of vanity because I had to hit those returns. But I learned from doing all that kind of stuff what it took to run an apartment complex. And that's why I tell people, you think on the surface, it's great. Real estate investing, you just email a couple people, you throw in an offer, you raise some money, they send in checks, it's great. But there's a lot more that goes into it. And if you get that hands-on experience, you'll be much more appreciative for the people that do work hard on site, and the maintenance people, and the managers, and leasing agents, and whatnot. So that's my view.
For real, yeah.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah,
you're welcome. David. I love what you guys are doing. Multifamily Women's Mastermind. I'm a huge fan and supporter. You guys have a male cheerleader in the background.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. Thank you. I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up, though. I know it's getting late, but thank y'all for joining us tonight. And we'll announce our December Zoom meeting soon, and our guest and date and time and all that. So keep an eye out for that, and I hope everybody has a great night or what's left of it.